All right, welcome back to Redneck Rantings. It is Sunday, April the 28th, 2019. We got us a brand new rant. I want to talk about the synagogue shooting that occurred in California over the weekend, and I also want to talk about some of what has been said in response to it. Now, a little quick recap of that horrible event. A sick, evil individual walked into a Jewish place of worship with a gun in California, which is basically one gigantic gun-free zone. It's one of the least Second Amendment friendly states in the Union, if not the least Second Amendment friendly state in the Union. And despite that, this guy had a gun and he opened fire on a bunch of innocent men, women, and children who were simply trying to pray and celebrate the Jewish holiday of Passover. And in the process, several people were wounded, including the rabbi. But fortunately, the tragedy was not as bad as it otherwise might have been due to the efforts of two very brave men who I happen to respect the hell out of. One of them was a congregant who rushed the guy, and another one was an off-duty Border Patrol agent who had a gun on him and shot back at this piece of shit, thereby derailing his attempt at mass murder. And good for these two guys. You know, again, the whole cliche of not all heroes wear capes. The whole world is out watching Avengers Infinity War's Endgame this weekend. Meanwhile, these two guys are actually doing the Captain America thing for real. And I got big respect for these guys. This is another, and I want to address, first off, I want to give big props to these two gentlemen. I want to address the fact that this is another shining example of the ineffectuality of citizen disarmament laws, as well as the hypocrisy of these left-wing politicians and the stupidity of many of their adherents, if you will, many of their supporters, because what has happened, yet again, is that a scumbag has tried to hurt people with a gun under circumstances where he wasn't supposed to have a gun and wasn't supposed to be able to get access to a gun, but he got access to a gun, and he brought it in, and he hurt people. And what are the politicians doing and saying? They're saying, oh my God, thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers. And yet many of these people, including State Senator Amy Klobuchar from my home state, are extremely anti-Second Amendment. And I am frankly sick and fucking tired of these ridiculous, counterintuitive, body-stacking, hypocritical policies. We need to wake up to the fact that you do not get to talk about how sympathetic you are to people who have been shot at by a mass murdering scumbag on Saturday or Sunday, and then Monday go into the office and pass laws that make it harder for law-abiding people to shoot back at this asshole. All right? And I am speaking to Senator Amy Klobuchar, and I'm speaking to every other politician on the left or the right who passes these bullshit, counterintuitive civilian disarmament laws. We're not going to call them gun control laws or anti-gun crime laws. We're going to call them what they are, citizen disarmament laws. Okay? This is like pulling a dog's teeth out of its head in the interests of making the dog safer. Okay? You do not make any living creature anywhere ever safer by stripping it of its ability to defend itself effectively. And if you do that, you don't get to claim any kind of moral virtue by expressing sympathy when that same creature that you worked to render helpless gets hurt because it couldn't defend itself, in part because of your efforts. All right? Citizen disarmament laws do not fucking work. And it is well past time that politicians, again, on both the left and the right, because I'm seeing Republicans doing it, and I'm telling you guys, those of you who are getting behind this bullshit, you need to remember that there is a little thing called an election cycle, and those of us who own guns have your names in our pockets at election time. And we're going to remember your voting record. Okay? We need to stop doing this. All we are doing is making it easier for the bad guys to do their thing. All right? If it hadn't been for those two heroes in California, the bodies would have been stacked up like Christmas presents under the tree. Well, okay, that's a bad example because they're Jewish, but you get my point. The bodies would have piled up in that synagogue, just like they did in Christchurch. And it would have been another national tragedy. And it is a national tragedy because anytime anybody gets hurt senselessly, it's a tragedy. I don't care if they get killed or not. You take one in the arm, you take one in the head, it's a tragic event. But it would have been the same old story of a bunch of people getting murdered. Oh my gosh, it's so tragic. We need to pass more anti-gun laws. And it's not working. The only people it's working for is the funeral industry and the emergency services people who get paid when they go out on these calls. So can we stop pretending that civilian disarmament laws actually do anything but put blood and bodies on the ground and make it easier for evil men to do evil acts? That's part of it. The other thing I want to address is these idiots that I see every single time something like this happens. Because, and you've all seen this, all right? A bad person does something bad. It makes national or international headlines. Somebody like me, some pro-gunner, comes along and says, well, you know, this wouldn't have happened if those people could have shot back. And then somebody else comes along. I almost said some other moron, but that implies that people who want people to have guns are morons. And frankly, we're the smart ones here because, again, it's easier to defend yourself if you have the tools to do it. But then some moron comes along and says, nobody's looking to take away your guns. And that is demonstrably false. And we need to wake up to that too. What the anti-gun crowd calls common sense gun legislation is just basically weasel words and buzzword bingo speak for civilian disarmament. Their idea of common sense gun laws is just that, to strip people of their guns. But they inevitably open their same old tired bullshit song and dance with, nobody wants to take your guns. Oh, really? Well, let's see here. What about Representative Eric Swalwell and his little quote about the government has nukes? This crazy fucker, an elected official, and guess which party he was with, was talking about the fact that the U.S. government has nuclear weapons in the event that American citizens resisted having their guns taken away from them. Okay? Let's talk about my personal pet peeve, red flag laws. Red flag laws precisely intend to take away people's guns without due process. So don't hand me any bullshit about how nobody's looking to take away your guns. People are very much looking to take away your guns. Let's take a look at the so-called assault rifle ban, which basically outlaws the possession of certain types of firearm, which in point of fact statistically are used in a very minute number of cases in a criminal fashion, fewer times, I would point out, than hammers, knives, or fists, and way fewer times than handguns. And yet we want to ban those, not because they are a significant contributor to the crime stats, but because they have certain cosmetic features which make them look scary. But nobody wants to take your guns. We just want to make it illegal for you to own them, and if you don't turn them in, we want to confiscate them. Well, you know what? To me, that sounds a lot like wanting to take my guns away. All right. We can talk about so-called gun buyback programs. Nobody wants to take away your guns, but we're going to ask you to come in with a $500 rifle, and we'll give you a $25 Best Buy or Walmart card. But nobody wants to take your guns. We just want common sense gun legislation. And I have talked to so many of these people, and so many of them have no sense of history or no sense of what it's like to be in a life or death situation like that. All right, people talk about, I've literally had this conversation where, well, you only need 6 shots to defend yourself. You know what? When I carry a pistol, I carry 15 in the mag, 1 in the chamber, and at least 1 spare magazine. I don't care who knows that out there in internet land. All right? If you haven't been in that situation, if you are not somebody who carries, shut your mouth. Don't tell me what I do or don't need to keep myself safe. And when I ask these people, well, why do you say that? They say, well, hey, Wyatt Earp only needed 6 shots at the OK Corral. Was it Doc Holliday? He only had 6 shooters. They've got this idea that they've got this idea that carrying guns is something that happens in the Old West, and they have this and that's what they're locked into. They have this Wild West image. John Wayne, the Lone Ranger, like I said, Wyatt Earp in the OK Corral. They think of guys strolling down a dusty street in a cow town or a mining camp, or in the TV show Deadwood, with a 6-shooter strapped on their hip. That's where their brain goes, and they think, well, these guys carried guns and they only needed 6 shots. Bullshit. They carried 6 shots because that's all that they had. All right, and a lot of these guys carried multiple guns, and they carried multiple preloaded cylinders so that they could quickly reload their guns. I guarantee you that if Wyatt Earp and his brothers and Doc Holliday had access to a bunch of to a bunch of standard capacity, say, Sig Sauers, guns that had 15 or 17 in the magazine, if they had the ability to choose between 6 shots and 17, I fucking promise you that they would have taken the 17. These guys had access to single-shot pistols. They didn't take them. Why? Because more bullets are better in a defensive situation. So don't hand me this bullshit of, well, you only need 6 shots, and don't talk to me about how nobody's trying to take your guns, because the reality is the anti-gun crowd absolutely is trying to take away our guns. They are trying to take them away through red flag legislation. They are trying to take them away by making it illegal for people who are of the legal majority in this country, but under a certain arbitrary age limit, to purchase firearms, even though they're old enough to serve in the military and get their ass blown to pieces in some godforsaken desert rat hole. But hey, if you're a civilian, you can't own this kind of a gun because you're too young. But hey, you want to join up? You want to risk your ass for Uncle Sam? Here's the keys to a fucking tank. But nobody's trying to take your guns. And it's provably false. Just like it is provably false that we are making ourselves safer when we give up our firearms, when we give up our ability to effectively defend ourselves. All we are doing is making it easier for the bad guys to do what they do better. All right? So if you're going to argue against civilians owning guns, come at it from a place of logic. But the problem is you can't. You cannot argue in favor of disarming civilians from a place of logic, because it's illogical to say that you are going to be safer by trusting on the goodwill, by entrusting your fate to the goodwill of evil men. If you could trust them not to hurt you, they wouldn't be criminals in the first fucking place. And don't hand me any bullshit of let the cops handle it, because I have been in a situation where I had a guy threatening to kill me, and I called the police, and it took them 20 fucking minutes to show up, and the only reason I didn't get shot in the goddamn face is I had a gun on my hip, and I had my hand on the gun, and I said, if I see metal in your hand, I am lighting you up. All right? And I could do a whole nother rant about that, and I may just do that tomorrow night, or the night after, and I may recount that little adventure which, by the way, still fucking gives me nightmares. So, can we just stop it, please? You want to talk common sense gun laws? Quit trying to disarm people. Start passing laws that say if you use a gun in the commission of a crime, we are going to punish you extra just for having the gun. We're going to give you 7 years, no good time, no time off, just for having the gun. And for every gun you have on your person while committing that crime, that's another 7 years. So if you walk into your local 7-Eleven and you stick a gun in the face of the clerk and say, empty the register, and the cops catch you and they find one gun on you and they find a backup on you, congratulations, that's 14 for the firearms, and then the other 5 to whatever for armed robbery. And that's whether or not you hurt anybody. That is common sense gun legislation. Let the good people go about their lawful business safe and armed and taking personal responsibility for their own defense. And let's start dropping the hammer on actual criminal activity, because we're not doing anybody any good with the way we're going, and we haven't for years. Gun ownership in this country is at an all-time high. Gun crime is at an all-time low. We do not have a gun problem in this country. We have a demented sociopath problem in this country and a deluded, fear-mongering politician problem that says, give up your rights and I'll keep you safe. Those are the problems we have in this country. Okay? Rant out. Y'all have a good night. Like, share, subscribe, hit the bell button, and remember, as always, I reserve the right to delete any comments that I don't particularly approve of. This is a democracy. One man, one vote. I'm the man. I get the vote. Bye.